Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am O'Brien McMahon, and this is People Business. In this episode, I am joined by Ashley Elmore, Vice President of Human Resources at Meow Wolf. That is meow like a cat and wolf like the animal. Meow Wolf is a very unique experiential art exhibit. We'll get into more of what exactly it is when we get into the interview, but really unique creative business. And Ashley works there helping oversee the HR department. I was excited to bring her on after coming across Meow Wolf. There's a great video on the organization and its backstory, which I referenced in the interview. You can find that in the show notes. And I was just interested in what would HR look like in a totally creative organization like Meow Wolf. I reached out to Ashley. She was kind enough to come on the show. I was very excited to dive in and just talk about the blend of business and creative and what that can mean and how it can help give all of us in the workforce permission to be our best, most creative selves. Really fun conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Here is Ashley Elmore. Ashley, welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you on. I had come across Meow Wolf and was like, what is this? And then my next thought was, man, what must it be like to run HR in that organization? Lo and behold, I found you and reached out, and you were kind enough to agree to come on the show and talk about your experience, which should be fun today. So excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's jump in for those who are unanointed. What is Meow Wolf?
Yeah, I feel like that's the number one question that we get. And for someone that hasn't been to a Meow Wolf, first, I would say go to Meow Wolf. I think that's probably the best way to understand it. But I guess to try and explain it, we're often described as an immersive art experience. But I think our creatives and visionaries would probably paint a more fascinating picture that we're really a spatial storytelling enterprise that blends art, design, music, play, all with the goal of using creativity to open people's minds to the possibilities of the world around them. Right now, we have 5 permanent exhibitions. We just opened our 5th in Houston, Texas last month, and we're gearing up to open our 6th exhibit in LA that is set to open in 2026. Each of our exhibitions showcases, dozens of incredible art installations that feature both local, national, international artists. And I think what really sets us apart is that we invite our guests to dive into the art, touch it, explore every corner, and interact it in ways that your typical art museum or art installation really wouldn't allow. And to kind of round things out, each of our exhibitions offers a retail gift shop and one-of-a-kind food and beverage offering to kind of round out the experience. And then, of course, I wouldn't be an HR person if I didn't say that the cherry on top of it is our staff that really gives an interaction to our thousands of guests or travelers, as we call them, that pass through our exhibits every day.
Wonderful. Thank you. And for anyone who's like, I still don't get it, go to the show notes. I'll put a link in there to the documentary that was done on Meow Wolf and the history and origin of that. It is a really cool origin story for anyone who likes art or creators, that whole mentality. And there's even a fun celebrity element in there. George R.R. Martin makes an appearance. So check that out, and you can get more on what Meow Wolf is. We'll probably get a little bit more insight as we unpack this. So what is the culture like at Meow Wolf?
Oh, my goodness.
How would you define that?
Yeah. So the culture at Meow Wolf is, I would say, it's expressive. It's unusual, caring, unexpected, maximal, and ever-changing. And honestly, I don't think it's possible to define a single experience of our culture, and nor would I claim to be the one qualified to do so. But I think after 5 years of being here, that's what I've come to understand about it. And I think our core values really shape the culture. And, we can dive into that or.
Yeah, I want to unpack those a little bit, but I guess just to give a little more context as we get into this. So encourage people to go watch that film that I mentioned, or even just the YouTube video on it, like the trailer for it. It was created by a group of creatives who were kind of doing these types of installations like in their spare time, sort of just creating it to create it. And then they wanted to really turn it into a business. And so this is a business that was grown very organically out of creative expression versus somebody saying like, oh, how do I maximize the dollars through a creative means? This was like, how do we do more creation and sustain it through a business, right? So it's kind of coming at it from a little different perspective. So I want to get into the values, but like, how do art and business meet in the organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always that tension, right, between art and business and how the two meet in the middle, that play between creative expression and how you run a business. And if we want to go back to the origins and talk about how the company came to be, I think that's certainly an interesting story to talk about. But if we, talk about kind of that tension between the art and the business side, I think we've kind of come to see those as almost like two sides of the same coin. And we've often kind of described ourselves as a social impact art project that powers a business and vice versa. More recently, we're starting to talk about how creativity drives the innovation engine, but revenue keeps it running by giving us the resources to bring those ideas to life. Our exhibitions are all about sparking creativity and making an impact. And the business, the revenue that they generate is what lets us keep pushing the boundaries and expanding. So there's definitely a balancing act of recognizing that creativity needs the business side, the financial stability to thrive. And we need that creative aspect to stand out in a crowded world. So, yeah.
Yeah, I like that. And it aligns with other conversations we've had on here. I interviewed a gentleman named Brian Emerson who runs a company, Iron, and he also teaches a leadership certificate at Georgetown University. He is an expert on polarities, which are these seemingly contradictory but actually complementary traits that organizations or individuals need to be successful. And I think an organization like yours, like you can look at art and you can look at the financial side of the business as competing and the tension between the two. But to your point, they're two sides of the same coin, right? Like if you get wrapped around one polarity, it just totally distorts everything and you're not going to be successful. If you get totally wrapped around the business and the financials, you're going to lose the art and the creativity that made it successful, that drew people to you, both employees and customers. And then if you get wrapped all around the art, it's not going to be sustainable. And so you need to be able to navigate through those two polarities. And yeah, there will be some tension between them because there's always, you can feel them each pulling on you as you go through them. But to be successful, you have to navigate that type of polarity. All right, so let's unpack the values then. Can you share what the values are?
Yeah. Our core values really shape our culture, and just to kind of go through those. So the first is collaborative creativity. And to paraphrase that in my own words would be, that we believe that creating together opens up endless possibilities for ourselves, for our guests, and really for the world. The next would be provocative playfulness, and that meaning that we celebrate the unexpected because it's the gateway to discovery. The third being that outsiders are welcome because we're all outsiders in our own way. So we make space for everyone to feel like they belong, whether that's in the workplace or in our exhibits. Authentic compassion. We're kind punks. I don't recall who gave us the term or called us kind punks, but somewhere along the way, someone started calling us kind punks. And I really think that's a good way of phrasing us. But we support each other and we stand up for what we believe in. And the last core value would be audacious courage, is that we have the courage to reinvent ourselves and push the boundaries of art.
All right. I would love to unpack some of those.
Yeah.
Let's start with creative collaboration. What does that look like in practice, and how do you foster that in an environment?
Yeah. Creative collaboration is about creating that environment that supports innovation, that welcomes diverse perspectives, and really encourages people to work together in new ways, particularly for us in the HR world and people strategy. That means designing a space where creativity can thrive, like for our benefits team or from a well-being standpoint. We recognize that creativity needs mental space. And so we offer things like wellness programs. We have a benefits reimbursement program. We have creative outlets like workshops or spaces for inspiration sharing. The ultimate goal of being giving that mental space, reducing burnout so that collaboration can stay sustainable and productive over the long haul. Because it's not just one art project. It's not just one art exhibition. These are multiple exhibitions, multiple projects that we're creating over the long term.
Wonderful. In there, you were talking about giving creation space, right?
Yes.
So the wellness programs and that. Do you have any other examples of maybe what that might look like, or ways that you've done that either with physical space or giving people time, or would be curious other ways that comes up outside of like a wellness program or that kind of thing?
Yeah. Perhaps another example would, be our sabbatical program that we have presently. So, we have a number of members of our art team task force that are returning from the Houston install. So as I mentioned, we just opened our exhibit in Houston. And for those folks that are down there helping to finish up the install and make sure that that exhibition is ready to go, it's grueling work, right? It's incredible work, and it's work that they're hugely passionate and invested in, but it's long days, and they're separated, potentially from their friends, their family, their home space for extended periods of time. So when they come home, they're ready for a rest. They're ready for a recharge. So, for that group, we did like a down week for folks that were core to that installation. But then, there are some folks that, want to take advantage of a sabbatical program just to have a little bit of extra space to maybe go work on a side creative project. And having that extra space just to break away helps give them time to have a little bit of creative rest, recharge, or even go work on a side project that's going to help them come back and be reinvigorated and ready to participate in the creative process all over again.
This might seem like a no-duh question, but where did the idea for giving that group a down week when they return come from?
I can't take credit for it. I don't know. I think it was probably some of the leadership on our artistic design and production team. They brought that to it. So I would guess that it was the folks that were rolling off of one of the previous installs that brought that idea forward.
Okay. And the reason I ask that is there are so many ways I think that we can humanize the workforce and give people what they need, like just offer a little bit more flexibility here and there to really meet people's needs. But I think often it's like, well, we need a policy for that, or like, well, we think at corporate that everybody's going to like one more floating holiday, and you're not actually like connected to the people. And so I was curious where that idea came from, because it sounds great. And I know that most of the leaders in your organization are also creatives, just at least from what I have seen. So I imagine that they are plugged in and understand. But I think there's an importance to listening to your workforce as well. And even if you're not asking them directly, just like paying attention to what's going on and being willing to offer some things. Hey, do you need this or do you need that? Even if they're still showing up to the office, like, a lot of corporate organizations are not going to send their people to do a creative install for 8 weeks where they're not going to see their family. That's kind of a unique scenario to your business. But I think there are periods of time where work gets busy, or there are really stressful projects that are just, there's a lot of opportunity to pay attention to what people need. So that was kind of where that question came from.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to, considering the workforce and what's important to this employee group in particular, and understanding the needs of a creative workforce and the passion and the purpose and the need for space, and then, designing, whether it's a policy, whether it's a program, or whether it's just something as simple as, if you were closest to this work, just go home for the week kind of thing. Whatever it is that you're designing, whatever it is that you're doing, keeping the idea of who your workforce, what your product is, what your brand is at the heart of the thing that you're designing. I think that's a core tenet of what we should be doing, especially in the HR people strategy world.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in HR and people strategy, right? You're designing work for humans.
Right.
That's a big part of what you're doing. So you are designing the experience for a customer, which is the internal employees. So that's why I'm a big proponent that all the principles of design apply to the experiences of work.
Absolutely.
What about provocative playfulness? How does that show up in practice?
Oh, man. Yeah. And that one's my favorite. So, that's really all about creating the environment where employees are free to think outside the box and challenge the usual way of doing things, coming up with the creative solutions, having fun, doing it along the way, and taking risks in a supportive space. It's okay to try something new and fail, and then maybe try again. I think one thing that we did a little bit differently this year on the HR side was around learning and development. Our learning and development manager spent a lot of time this year designing some different learning experiences that were really hands-on, playful. They were really designed to be more based around, some improv style role playing, less about sitting through traditional lecture and more about learning through creative or unconventional activities. There was some blended learning where there was some online components as well, but it was really about getting people to challenge their assumptions and think differently. And again, goes back to considering the creatives at the heart of designing the program and considering the experience that we wanted them to have. And so the curriculum on that was, we were trying to upskill our supervisors, our frontline managers. And so we wanted them to have a little bit of play in that. And so, that was a little bit of provocative playfulness in practice.
Yeah. The other one you said was, or another, one of the others you said was audacious courage. It would seem to me, and you can correct me if this is just a stereotype and isn't right, but creatives have certain stereotypes. And when you have a group of people that are basing their work and their identity in creativity and provocativeness and audacious courage and being kind punks and all of these types of things that you talk about, I could see that the explosion of ideas and possibilities is huge, almost never ending. And yet, in order to get a project done and in order to make it profitable, you have to hone that in somehow. And so there's a honing to this audacious courage and provocative playfulness as well. I would just be curious, so maybe another polarity, right? Is how do you navigate that polarity where you want people to be audacious and courageous and come up with the craziest mind-bending experiences for people, and then also fit it in a room and make it profitable?
Oh, goodness. Do I have the answer for this? Yeah. How do we self-level out? Is that the question here?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a much simpler way of getting to what I was asking. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I guess, there's this idea of when you're creating something, right? You'll use as much resources you have. You'll keep working on the thing until you run out of time, until you run out of resource, until it's time to open the doors, right? At its simplest level, I suppose that's where the structure of our project teams comes in place. And I think that's something that over the past few years is in our organizational life cycle, we've come a long way in, is just putting in place the traditional structure, going back to we're no longer the artist collective that we were back in 2016, 2018. Again, the polarity of it's not the artist collective. It's now we have project planning, we have project management, we have oversight so that it's not just unchecked creativity that's just happening. There's a balance there. So yeah, there's the creativity and the structure going hand in hand. So there's two pieces and parts having that. There's producers and creative directors on the projects that are also providing oversight to these things that are ensuring that they're staying on time and on task and on budget and things like that.
Yeah. Well, and that's a misconception about creativity in general, is that it's this unrestrained thing and you give somebody a blank page and, they go off and become anything. Anyone who's ever done any drawing or writing knows that staring at a blank page is probably the most daunting thing. But if you have constraints that you need to work within, suddenly creativity can take off. It was funny. This happened last night. It's funny how these things happen serendipitously with these episodes. But listeners of this show know that I like creative writing. And I was sitting down at the table last night and I was like, had a little extra time. And I was like, oh, this would be a great time to sit down and write something. And I had no idea what to write. And I sat there for like 10 minutes and I was like, I'm not inspired by anything. I don't know. And then my wife came downstairs and she was like, hey, I had this idea for song lyrics, which she's never done before. And she's like, can you help me? I'm like stuck on this one line. And she showed me what she was writing. And I sat there and for like 10 minutes helped her rewrite the chorus of the song. And it was really fun. And we got it exactly the way she wanted it. And it was really fulfilling. And I was just thinking like, man, left to my own devices, I had no idea where to go. But as soon as you bring a problem set and a constraint, now the creativity took off. And so I think whenever we're trying to be creative, being purposeful with the constraints we put in, whether they're time, whether they're budget, whether they're resource constraints, whatever, like that can be really powerful in actually getting better end results.
Yeah, absolutely.
One other thing I wanted to ask about the values, you said being kind punks, we stand up for what we believe in. So being that and believing in that, one of the things I think is interesting is companies taking political and social stands these days. And the bigger your workforce, the more diverse your workforce, the more diverse those opinions are going to be. And having any one sort of corporate statement or corporate philosophy that aligns with all of your people can be really challenging. And I've talked to a lot of HR leaders who really struggle with the right way to do this. I'd just be curious if you have any comments on how your organization thinks about navigating that diversity and sort of the current climate that we're in, where companies are maybe feel more pressure to take public stands on issues.
Yeah, it is an interesting moment because, maybe 5-10 years ago, I think there was a school of thinking that your politics, your religion, you didn't discuss those things in the workplace. And then, a couple of years ago, it became an expectation that the workforce actually wanted us to talk about those things in the workplace, and actually staying silent on those topics became something that many employees in the workplace, and yes, our workforce as well, wanted to have conversations in the workplace on those topics. And I would say not that we're necessarily taking public positions on initiatives or candidates or things like that, but rather leveraging things like we've put together, I would call it more of like employee resource groups in each of our exhibits. And then at our corporate group, our chief inclusion officer has led that initiative. Those groups can talk about like the issues that are important to them and bring forth recommendations or different ideas of things they would like to see. For example, there was a change in the exhibition's uniform guidelines they wanted to see. And so like we made that change. They wanted to talk about different volunteers and things. And so like our impact group put in place a different way that employees could donate and that the company would make a match to. So it's not, I think, that we're necessarily making, public statements about different social issues, but I think we're putting in place avenues or ways for our employees to connect with each other and then have impact, because social impact, being a certified B corporation, that is a important component of who we are and our identity as a company. So yeah, it is, kind of like a fine balance of what we do as a company, but I think it is important for employees to have those channels and those avenues to have expression, to raise their voices and make their positions known, because it's conversations that they do want to have in the workplace. And I think we have to listen to that, and we have to be, hearing that.
Yeah. So what I heard you say there, which I really like the way that you frame that, is that you are giving people opportunities to have a voice and be heard. You are creating opportunities for them to go out and make an impact in the ways that they want to make an impact in the world, not necessarily needing to make any public statement. Not that I don't think I heard you say that you would never make a public statement, but I also heard you say you don't need to make public statements. As long as the people are heard and they're able to make the impact they want, the company doesn't necessarily have to make a Twitter post.
Right.
Is that fair?
Yeah. And, I think, there was probably once upon a time in the history of the company that we did make more public statements, but
sure.
But I think that's a fair summation of kind of the current state.
Yeah. Again, not to say that you didn't, but I think that that's a good perspective. That I like that, because there were plenty of companies that made public posts that didn't necessarily create the avenues for their people to make an impact. My wife and I talk all the time. Like, we can sit and shout in our house about how upset we are about some policy or some thing a politician did or whatever, but like, that doesn't change anything, and it doesn't help anything. And if you want to make a change, you got to go out and get involved and find ways to make impact, even just, on your family or your local community. And so I love that. Like, hey, let's give people a voice and an opportunity to go out and make an impact in the ways that they want to. And then, we can figure out what feels right for the organization to be doing, outside of that. But I think that can take hopefully it would take some of the pressure off to need to respond to every incident that comes up.
Yeah.
I like that. That was an unexpected rabbit hole, but I appreciate you going down it with me. It does lead to one other question, unrelated to political issues or social issues, but how does leadership communicate back to the employee base? I heard you say there's a lot of upward feedback opportunities. What does communication look like out? Like, how are you communicating the values, the culture, changes in the business? Like, how often is that happening? Where is it happening? What does that look like?
Yeah. So, a lot of different avenues. So, we have employees in a lot of different spaces. So, we have, our corporate employees, we have employees in our exhibitions, we have remote employees that don't ever or rarely come into a Meow Wolf space. And so we try and reach employees in a number of different ways. And I'll be transparent in just saying that we've tried a lot of different ways and we'll continue to try a lot of different ways. And I don't know that we've always gotten it right. We try to reach people on Slack on like a daily basis and reach people that way. We have a weekly newsletter that goes out via email that we call the Monday Minute. And that's a way to just share like general company updates from either leadership, or those are like crowdsourced updates. It's also a way for employees to share like shout outs to each other about like, thanks for helping me out on this, or, so-and-so is always doing a great job. We also have a few times a year, we'll do all company meetings. Typically they rotate to either a different exhibition or a company at the corporate headquarters. And that's an opportunity to get more broader company updates. And then that's direct from like our CEO, our CFO, our chief people officer, different executives. And then, within our exhibitions, the general managers there, who are kind of like the captains of their ship, if you will, they're, walking the floor. They're there every day at pre-shifts, giving updates to the employees there. So we try and meet employees in a lot of different ways, a lot of different spaces. We also have a community screens program, which is TVs in the break room, which are pushing out different announcements as employees are coming in and out of the break rooms. So we know folks are connected in a lot of different ways. And so we try and meet them in as many different ways as we can.
Yeah. How often are you talking about your values?
Oh, it's never enough.
Yeah.
It's never enough. But yeah, we try and tie it in to as many things as we can, right? tying any different program, any different initiative, I think, back to the values is something that we should be endeavoring to do, especially as we're developing something new. I think it's important to try and tie that back to how does this relate to a value? What is the explanation behind that? So, again, transparently, do we talk about them enough? Probably not. But I think it should be something that is tied back to the values. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, is any organization talking about them enough? Probably not. Even the ones who are doing a great job of it. It's just one of those things that I feel like you just have to keep talking about until absolutely everybody is sick of hearing about it, and then keep talking about it still, because people will create a story about the place that they're working. And if you are not the one creating that story and reinforcing that story all the time, other stories will creep in. They will start to write their own chapters of what they think is happening, and it is almost never what you want them to be thinking is happening, or where you want them to be thinking the business is going. It's just people have this habit of catastrophizing or looking for risk, especially risk to themselves and their safety. And so you kind of have to constantly be reinforcing that stuff. That's what I've seen. That's what a lot of people have reinforced on this show. And I've seen it in our own organization that I've worked in for the last 15 plus years.
Yeah. And there's so many great things that are coming out of the work that our artists are doing. There's so many great things that is coming out of the work that our non-artists are doing. And even on the corporate side, whether it's IT, finance, accounting, HR, there's so much to celebrate that ties back to our values. I mean, I think you're absolutely right that talking about that more, tying the celebrations back to how that exemplifies the values. Absolutely. We should be doing more of that.
Yeah. So that's a great segue to a question I was going to ask you is, how do you celebrate, and what do you celebrate at Meow Wolf?
Oh my goodness. We love a good party at Meow Wolf. Celebration, I think, is kind of at the heart of culture of Meow Wolf. I mean, even going back to thinking about the founders starting things up in Santa Fe. Not that I was there in any way, shape, or form, but hearing about the origins and, when they were originally trying to shake things up, part of it was throwing events, throwing parties that celebrated art, that celebrated music. So I think it's really at the heart of our culture. And I think when there's something worth celebrating, we make sure to do it in a big way. We recognize the work of our colleagues through multiple channels. I mentioned our company-wide weekly newsletter, our Monday Minute, that has, peer-to-peer shout outs. Our exhibitions all have a peer-to-peer celebration program that's themed to the exhibition that you're in. We have our Cosmic Sprinkles. Cosmic Sprinkles probably just sounds ridiculous to your listeners, but it's a spot bonus program that helps celebrate our high performers. We try
Cosmic Sprinkles. That's what those are called.
Yes. It's, probably sounds ridiculous to our non-Meow Wolfers, but very much on brand for those that are within us. We try and celebrate quarterly promotion announcements. I mean, just really trying to celebrate achievement within our team members. And then, of course, we love to throw a good party. So whether it's a team milestone, opening of a new exhibition, spontaneous celebration of creative wins, we want to bring people together. We want to have fun. Celebrating is an integral part of how we foster belonging, motivation, appreciation for our organization. I think some of the longtime employees, especially there in Santa Fe, are really, really great way to carry the culture forward, especially for some of the newer comers to the organization to see and feel the culture of Meow Wolf by seeing the celebration. I think it's a great way to learn the essence of Meow Wolf by seeing the celebration.
Yeah, seeing what's rewarded is a great way to see what the culture stands for.
Yeah.
This is another question that might be weird, but who's driving those celebrations? Because I feel like we just talked about with communication, it's something you have to constantly be driving. I feel like celebration is something similar. It has to be purposeful, and then it can catch on, but there always has to be, I think, a concerted effort to not letting that drop off. Who owns that, and how do you perpetuate that?
Yeah, so it's really been a grassroots thing. I think there's been some centrally owned aspects of celebration, like things that do come from corporate or things that are owned by Total Rewards. A lot of it, though, I think has happened organically as things come up over time. We have pins are a big part of I call them cultural artifacts that started being created, and people like to collect them. Pins and patches are a big thing. People just started creating them in the field. And more recently, our Total Rewards team was like, we have to get a sense of where these are coming from because they're great and people love them and love to collect them. And we want to make sure it doesn't die out. So it really started as like a grassroots effort. But now as we've come to grow and we want to make sure that this culture can scale, we're starting to catalog it and try to make sure we can understand what all these artifacts are so that as, we start to grow, especially as we think about launching our 6th exhibition in 2026, that doesn't die out so that it is more intentional.
Yeah. Well, and I think that answers a question I was going to ask you is like, how have you perpetuated that culture as you've grown? Because that can be hard to do. But I think through a lot of what you said around communication and what you just shared around taking these artifacts and making sure that they perpetuate into new locations and transitioning culture and transitioning ritual and routine can be really impactful. Like, hey, this is what we do here. And these are the types of people we are. And here's the artifacts to prove that. Like that can be really, really powerful.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're really focused on preserving those core elements, the creativity, the collaboration, the inclusivity, while making sure we're flexible enough to meet the unique needs of the new location. It's about keeping that energy alive, and no matter where we are, making sure that the values continue to guide how we work together. Again, being intentional to foster that sense of belonging and connection, making sure that the new team feels supported, but still empowered to innovate and create their own new rituals or traditions, but making sure they're still aligned with the overall mission and values of what Meow Wolf is.
Yeah.
It's that balance, right? The freedom to experiment, but still, true to what the Meow Wolf vibe is.
Yeah. Free to experiment with some constraints. Let's talk about experimenting, because that was actually the next question I wanted to ask you. A little bit of a pivot, but failure within Meow Wolf. So a huge part of creativity is failing, right? You're trying new things, and not like total failures, but you're trying new things and they don't quite work, and you're editing and wrestling with ideas and starting over and iterating. How do you think about failure? How do you treat failure? And like, where is failure allowed and where is failure not allowed? How do you balance that?
Yeah. So you're right. Yeah. Failure is absolutely part of, I guess, any creative and business endeavor. I guess I would say failure is allowed in those areas where creativity, experimentation, and innovation are encouraged or required. I guess, for example, where we're developing new ideas, products, processes, we really see failure as part of that learning process, and teams are encouraged to take those risks. We need those bold ideas and we need to learn from what doesn't work, but we do know that learning from failure ultimately can lead to better solutions. So in those areas, I guess you could say failure isn't just allowed, it's expected as part of pushing those boundaries. However, I would say failure is less welcome, or there's a lower threshold or tolerance for failure where it jeopardizes core business functions, would not be tolerated, I guess, in functions of safety or employee well-being, areas of compliance, financial integrity. We have more strict standards in place to minimize risk, ensure accountability, things like that. So the key is knowing where failure can fuel growth and where it needs to be prevented to protect organizations' integrity and success. So, you come to Meow Wolf, it's not just a free-for-all of creativity and provocative playfulness. There's a time and place for it.
Yeah. I know you have a military background. One of my first episodes on here was with a former Navy SEAL veteran who was actually on SEAL Team 6, highest pinnacle of our military might. And he had said he had a 20-year career and only 4 of those years were spent in combat zones, deployed. And so 4/5 of his time was spent training and failing and training and failing. And, 1/5 of his time was spent actually in the field where failure was not an option, right? Because any types of failure in that environment means people lose their lives, get very badly injured. And so it was really interesting to have that conversation with him and talk about the importance of creating avenues where people can fail, even in like safety, what you talk about. I think we can all agree that failing in safety with an open exhibit is not acceptable. But as you are testing your exhibits, to test the safety and allow safety to fail there when there's nobody actually there, like that's how you create a safe environment later. And so I think I see organizations struggle. Individuals struggle with this in their lives too, to get out and actually like practice and test the thing that they're doing. It feels like we can't ever fail at these big critical things, but we're going to get the big critical things wrong if we're not willing to fail at some point.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And, going back to that idea of, an exhibit pre-opening, that's exactly why we have like a period of test and adjust where you're doing all of those things. That is the moment to fail. That is the moment to push the limits, to make sure, the rigging is good. All of those things are dialed in and ready to go so that, when we have that first guest walk through the door, it is safe. It is ready for showtime.
Yeah. Take that audacious courage, see what you can do, and then realize, well, we can't do all of this. We got to back it up. It's not quite safe. We got to back it up a little bit. Yeah. I like that as a principle. Like, let's see how far we can go. Let's see what the biggest, craziest idea is. And then let's rein it back to whatever but the craziest thing is that's also doable and safe, or whatever constraint we need to pull in. This has been a really fun conversation. It's been fun to kind of unpack this and learn. Is there anything else about Meow Wolf or the culture at Meow Wolf that we didn't tap into that you think makes it really special or unique as an organization?
Oh man, we touched on so much, but I think it's really the employees of Meow Wolf, all the great energy that they bring to it, not just on the creative side. Meow Wolf isn't just creatives. It's also a huge employee population of operators that keep each of our exhibitions open and ready for business every day. And I think the energy and the expertise that they bring is truly phenomenal. And so I think you could almost do a part 2 of operators. I think just the incredible talent that we have, not only on the creative side, but on the operator side of Meow Wolf, is what's kept me here, I think, for 5 years, is just the incredible workforce that we have.
One question on that, actually. So knowing that the organization has such creative roots, do you see that those roots sort of create a different experience or bring out a different side of the non-creative employees that you have?
Oh, absolutely. I think it makes the employee experience within our exhibitions so vivacious, so offbeat, so different from probably any other recreation or hospitality job you would have. I think back of house, coming into a pre-shift, just the camaraderie and the conversations that you see our staff having, it's really refreshing just to see the vibe, I guess, that we have back of house. The connection that our employees have, I guess, and seeing how that translates into the connection that our employees have with our guests is really an awesome thing to see come to life, especially as the new exhibition opens. So yeah, I think that's what really draws in a unique workforce in our exhibitions, as well as that creative spirit that Meow Wolf is all about, and that purpose of bringing creativity forward to our guests in the world, and the possibility of play.
Yeah.
And the ability of creativity and imagination to change the world for our guests.
Yeah. And even the corporate positions, I would think, like, the word that comes to mind is permission. Like, what creativity really is permission to explore, to think, to do things in a different way, to innovate, right? Like it is permission to be a really full version of yourself. And I think in a lot of corporate environments where there isn't a lot of creativity already infused just naturally into those businesses, not that you can't be your full self, but it's not drawn out of you the way that I would imagine an organization like Meow Wolf draws it out of you, just because it's just in the air. Like everybody has permission. It's in all of your values, right? It's creative collaboration, provocative playfulness, audacious courage. Like all of those are giving permission to your employees to think differently and behave differently. And so I imagine that permission it just feels really good when we have permission to be ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that really has stood out to me in getting to know so many of my different colleagues is that learning how many of my different colleagues on the corporate side have a creative pursuit or a creative passion that really seems counter. And I won't name drop anyone, but I have a friend on the digital operations team, highly technical role. You would not ever think that this person is an artist, but he actually had, or maybe still has, a room in the House of Eternal Return. Total artist, but you wouldn't know based on the job that he has that he's an artist. There's a member of our benefits team who has creative pursuits that you totally see manifest in the work that he does. I myself have some creative pursuits on the side. So, it's just really great to see so many different members of our team have different creative passions and pursuits, and they're encouraged to bring that or illuminate that in the work that they do in the day-to-day. So, I think that's probably something that's a little bit unique to Meow Wolf and probably helps folks bring a little bit more of their best self to the workplace.
Yeah, I get some funny looks in my corporate sales job when people find out I like writing fiction, and I wrote a children's book last year and people are like, what? So yeah, I get that. So I got to ask, what are your creative pursuits?
Oh man, do you really want to know?
I do. The people want to know, Ashley.
Yeah. And so I'm a singer, and once upon a time,
I won't make you sing.
I used to moonlight in a casino lounge act here. So
very cool. Very cool.
Past life, but secret's out.
That's all right. It's all right. It's all the same life, just makes it rich when you get to do a lot of different things. Well, Ashley, this is great. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I think there's a lot to learn from Meow Wolf. I love looking at organizations or individuals that are in an extreme in some way or just outliers to what the normal experience would be, because I think you can learn so much from seeing things out of the norm or at the extreme that all extrapolate back to what we can do in our normal day-to-day average existences as well. So thank you. Appreciate it. Everybody who is listening, check out the show notes. Everything we've talked about, more information on Meow Wolf will be there. And if you find yourself in a city with a Meow Wolf exhibition, please go check it out. You will not be disappointed. So thank you, Ashley.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hey folks, one last thing before you go. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to hit subscribe so you can stay up to date with future guests. That's it. Thanks for coming. Go make the most of your business and the people in it.